Please subscribe and don't forget to press the bell icon to get notified whenever we upload a new video.
In a market that is constantly flocking towards SUVs, zeroing down on a smart crossover has its pros and cons. Case in point, the Maruti Suzuki S-Cross, which has just undergone a facelift, and Rohit will tell you more about this car.
In the booming SUV market of India, Maruti Suzuki has literally cracked the code for the compact crossover segment with the Vitara Brezza. But at the slightly higher end of things, where the car, the S-Cross that gave birth to its premium Nexa initiative, things haven't quite been the blockbuster that Maruti Suzuki would have expected it to be. Nevertheless, they're breathing some fresh life into this car and hoping that it will change the fortunes of the S-Cross. Let's take a look. The changes to the S-Cross are primarily cosmetic, and they are evident the moment you look at the car's new face. Suzuki's focus was to make the crossover appear more aggressive and sportier than the model that it replaces. So while the cascading waterfall inspiration for the face seen on the outgoing S-Cross gave it a low-slung stance, the new one goes up for a nose-up stance instead to appear more SUV-ish. The new bonnet and the upright grille with its vertical slats contribute to that effect. The headlights get a more detailed design which makes them appear sleeker than the outgoing design. They also sport a new chunkier design for the daytime running lamps. The side profile remains largely unchanged, save for the new design for the alloy wheels. These are now shod with wider 215 section tyres compared to a 205s on the outgoing car. The signature colour also sees a change as the brown now makes way for a dark shade of blue. The latter looks a tad bit more sophisticated and highlights the chrome and the satin accents quite well. The revisions to the tail and the new detailing of the tail lights take an eagle eye to notice though. Not much has changed inside in terms of space or design. The cabin continues to look simple, European and well put together. The touch points are now done up in soft plastics. Inclusion of rear AC vents would have been a welcome change. The infotainment now gets Apple CarPlay and Android Auto compatibility. ISOFIX points for mounting child seats, anti-lock brakes and driver and front passenger airbags are now standard across the range. The instrumentation will now remind you of the change under the hood with a graphic that says hybrid. A moment of silence, because the old 1.6-litre engine from the outgoing S-Cross is no more. What you get is the 1.3 only. Of course, that was the more popular engine out of the two, and that is why Maruti Suzuki has decided to retain the engine in the facelift of the S-Cross, but the 1.6 is out. The 1.3, however, slight bit of a change. It now gets the mild hybrid technology, or SHIVs as most people at Overdrive like to call it, or SHVS. It also gets you the start-stop system, and that, according to me, is a little annoying in the city traffic where it just keeps going on and off every now and then. But it's a nice technology to have because it brings along some valuable fuel savings, especially if you're going to be driving in bumper-to-bumper traffic in the metro cities every day. We have already seen this tech in the Ciaz and the Ertiga, and Maruti Suzuki claims a 7% gain in fuel savings for the new S-Cross. The mild hybrid setup includes a start-stop system, regenerative braking and an electric motor which assists the car while moving from a standstill. Though not as powerful as the 1.6 on specs, the 1.3 diesel is quite a punchy motor and comes mated to a precise 5-speed gearbox. Moreover, it doesn't have the torque steer either. Between the 1.6 and the 1.3, the 1.3 always had a slightly lighter steering setup, and that continues with this car as well. What I do like is, unlike some of the newer power steering systems from Maruti Suzuki or from the rivals of this car, this one doesn't feel as lifeless. Of course, it's not as precise or not as communicative as some of the older steering systems from Maruti Suzuki. I'm talking about the older Swift. But this one is not as bad as something that we had in the Baleno or something from, say, the Ignis. This one still feels slightly better, which is a positive sign. The ride quality on the S-Cross was always one of its trump cards, and it continues to do so with the facelift as well. No real changes to it. However, for some reason I feel that the suspension setup on this particular car is a little bit noisier than what I remember of the earlier S-Cross that we had as a long-termer. That was the 1.6 variant, of course, but even the 1.3 that we drove earlier seemed to have a slightly silent suspension setup. This one seems a little noisier to me. But bump absorption is very good. The ride is slightly on the firmer side, and that also gives it some really good driving dynamics around the bends. But overall, I think it's a nice suspension setup. It rides really well, and it's not something that you will complain about even on some of the worst possible Indian roads that this car will encounter. The fat turbo on the S-Cross also seems grippier and less noisy than the outgoing car. The understeer, due to the lack of grip, has reduced significantly. The new tires complement the steering quite well too and make it a fun driver over the outgoing model. Overall then, the S-Cross remains a sensible car, but now irons out two concerns that we had with it: the understeery nature and the overtly simple design. If you compare the S-Cross to the other compact SUVs around it, it's always lost out because it's never had that butch, menacing stance that you expect from an SUV. But for someone who wants a classic crossover, in that sense, you want something that is better equipped than hatchbacks or sedans to take on the broken roads, but at the same time you want a car that gives you a car-like feel to drive, not really that race stance that an SUV offers, then the S-Cross ticks all the right boxes. It is the classic definition of what a crossover is. At the same time, it is spacious, it's got a frugal engine, and it rides quite well. And as a package, now it has become better than the car that it replaces.
Now this new S-Cross of course comes with a lot of changes, upgrades and a marginal increment in terms of pricing, which is a positive note. We will have to wait a couple of months to see just how well this car picks up in the market. Time then for us to wrap up this week's edition of Overdrive, but do send us your feedback, comments and suggestions, and keep in touch with us through Facebook as well as Twitter. Follow our latest videos on our YouTube channel. We'll see you next week. Until then, goodbye and thanks for watching.